really fortunate to have I would say the leading robotics expert in the world, our top choice for who would be the keynote speaker, Rodney Brooks. He has had an amazing career. He grew up in Australia, had affiliations at many of the top universities, but was a professor for much of his career at MIT. And in fact, he was the host for the first faculty interview I ever went on. So that's, I think, when we first met many years ago. He became emeritus faculty at MIT at the ripe old age of 55, and then since then has been a full-time entrepreneur. And I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but that your companies have sold the most robots of any companies worldwide. And so just, you know, there's really second to none here. He's now at Robust.AI, which is a relatively new company, but from what I hear, going great guns. He was also the founder of Rethink Robotics and iRobot, which many of you know through the Roomba, which is one of the biggest consumer successes for robotics. So. So as not to take more time from him, let's welcome Rodney Brooks.
Thanks, Peter. And I was in Austin last year, and on a Saturday afternoon, Peter took me around Anna His Gymnasium, and I recommend it to everyone that you should go see what's there. Oh, okay. I got you. Okay. Yeah, I did become a emeritus at age 55 because I really didn't want to become a grumpy old professor. So now I'm a grumpy old entrepreneur. This is the outline of the talk. I'm going to start with my 3 laws of robotics, because I'm going to refer to them, and then go on through these, to ending up with the return of the academics. So I've been in robotics a long time. I joined the hand-eye group at Stanford in 1977. That's me there with hair, lots of. And you see there that the Stanford arms, and right in Ken Salisbury's hand at the bottom is a parallel jaw gripper. I'm going to come back to parallel jaw grippers later. That was 1977. So over time in academia and in companies, I've developed 3 things that guide me. My first law, oops, I went too far, is that the visual appearance of a robot makes a promise about what it can do. And if that promise is not accurate, if it doesn't deliver on that promise, it sort of annoys people pretty badly. They feel led astray. But also, that's where some of the hype comes from. Second law, when robots and people exist in the same spaces, the robots shouldn't take away from people's agency, because that really gets them annoyed. If they have to accommodate the robots instead of the robots accommodating them, that's going to be bad. And the third thing is, and here I sort of lie, I say that it takes 10+ years of steady improvement after you got a real lab demo to get into practice. The lie there is it's 30 years, but no one believes that. So I cut it back to 10. So you have some hope of thinking, maybe I'm not completely full of it. Well, I may be full of it. So these things are about appearance, agency, and maturity. I am all-in on robotics, and what I'm doing right now, you've all seen these big buildings. When you take off from airports, these big warehouses, that's where our stuff is, and it's got to get to us. And these places are enormous, millions of square feet. That's where you get, if you put an online order, you get stuff from them. If you go to a bricks and mortar store, the stuff has come from these same facilities all over the country. If you're going to automate in there, if you are going to automate, it's often good to have a big handling system, no humanoids. And some of these handling systems are enormous, pushing stuff around. But there's a lot of legacy stuff. At Amazon, they bought Kiva Systems. When was that? Well over 10 years ago. And they have produced, they don't say, of course, but I think it's getting up towards 1 million of these orange robots, which bring shelves to human pickers. So the humans are the ones who pick, because we really are not good at having robots pick yet. So that's what Amazon does. But there's all these other warehouses, and they're just big. They're always big. By the way, I was talking to someone said they were avoiding a forklift truck in a factory. Forklift trucks are the alpha predators in these places. They are bad. There's hand trucks. This is doing case picking by hand. This is probably to go to a brick and mortar store. And then this is a mixture of case picking and individual picking. This is individual picking. And they're very crowded, some of these spaces. People are pushing carts around. This is apparel. If you look on the side, those boxes have clothing in them. In a clothing facility, there may be about 500,000 SKUs because there's so many sizes, so many colors, etc. So they're big, enormous places with very sparse picking. So at my company, we've entered this space by emulating the carts that people push around manually and making a robotic cart. So it's not too hard. The appearance is not promising crazy stuff. It's promising a cart that is can be autonomous and can also be interacted with by people, and people have agency over. So here he comes up, he grabs the orange handlebar, and the robot is his, does what he wants, it suspends what it's doing. Sorry for the little glamour shot there, Robust.AI. And it tries to help people. So here's someone's doing a pick, and it's lit up where that pick's supposed to go with the LEDs. That just saves about 2 seconds on a pick. But when you're doing millions and millions of picks a year, that adds up to real savings. But the other thing that's important here is the human pickers in these warehouses, typical warehouse, they do 30,000 steps a day, pushing a 100-kilogram cart around. So now they don't have to walk everywhere. The robots are somewhat autonomous. It does a lot of what's called the dead walking for them. And when it's power assist, it's easy for anyone to push them around. They can be actually quite small and still push 100 kilograms around without trouble. So it cuts down the number of steps and makes it easier for them. So this is all about helping someone. She's actually one of our electrical engineers, but she's a small person, but she can just push this around with ease. And you may have noticed a little while ago, one of the people grabbed the cart somewhere else on the cart, not on the orange handlebar, and it's back drivable. I'm going to skip this, go to the next slide. And here's an important thing. We invented a new form of holonomic motion. There's been holonomic motion around for a long time with those mecanum wheels. This is a brand new mechanism for holonomic motion, which I didn't know would exist. This is our patent. But if you look carefully there, the second person on the patent is an academic, Mark Yim from University of Pennsylvania. And why is this important? Robotics is not just about writing code. It's also about physics and people. And you really need to take those into account. And I like to think about a robot as a thing that you pump energy into and you pull energy out of. And a lot of the robots today are not good at losing energy in bad situations, and then they become unsafe. But if you think about it in terms of putting energy in and taking energy out, it changes the way you think about it, but also being sensitive to people. So that's what I'm doing in my day job. But I keep seeing this stuff. AI and robotics on the verge of changing the world forever. Finally, we're going to have robots. It's going to be fantastic. We've got AI everywhere. And it's just a little bit of hype there at the moment. And I say, for almost 70 years now, since 1956, there's been significant progress in artificial intelligence in the last decade. But that's been true at any time for the last 70 years. The last decade has made a lot of progress. There are new tools that are being widely applied in science and technology. That's been true for almost 70 years, the new stuff. And it's changing the way we think about ourselves and how to make further progress. So it's not just, AI just didn't get invented last year. It's been around for a long time in many forms. And there's a bounty of opportunities from it. At Robust, these are some of the things which at various times have been AI, control theory. A lot of that was developed in the 60s. That was AI. It was done in AI labs, Kalman filters, et cetera. So these are some of the tool chest we use in Robust.AI. You may notice This is slightly different from saying, we're just going to use end-to-end learning and figure everything out with lots and lots of data. We actually use lots of pieces and put them together. And that's where I think we're in great shape. I say there, we use humongous numbers of GPUs. Silicon is way, way, way cheap in terms of compared to what it's been. And the computation you can do is enormous. And how to use that usefully is where you can do new things that weren't possible before. But we have to remember there's lots of different techniques that are useful. And despite what everyone says, we're not on the verge of eliminating humans in either white-collar or blue-collar jobs. Humans are going to have jobs for a long time. The tasks may shift, but the jobs are not going away. And we're not about to have a revolution in medicine and the role of human doctors. We're not going to eliminate coding as a job. I keep reading about that just about every day. We're not going to replace humans with humanoid robots to do jobs that involve physical interaction in the world anytime soon. We're not going to be replacing human automobile and truck drivers worldwide. I think about 8 years ago, people were telling me, my kid's 5 years old. They're never going to have to learn to drive. They're never going to be in that danger. Well, they're learning to drive now. And we're not going to be replacing scientists with AI programs. This is a human element. Oh, AI and robotics is on the verge. It's going to change the world forever, and it's going to happen next year. Yeah, well, the second coming was going to happen next year a lot of times, too. It hasn't happened yet. And I think this sums it up for me. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, yet those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly while everyone else repeats it. And that's how I feel about the world right now. Oops. So I wrote these down. These are some of the hype cycles that I've seen in AI. I didn't quite see the first reinforcement learning one in 1959. But you see there, a lot of things have come back again and again. Neural nets are on their sixth comeback. Reinforcement learning multiple times. AI agents, they knew, we got AI agents. Well, we had SOAR, et cetera, back in the, when was that, the 1980s. Oh, we had Pandemonium in the 50s, which was AI agents. So these things keep coming back again and again, and every time people say, wow, this is new, this is gonna change the world. So let's talk about neural nets. This is the first paper on neural networks, 1943, McCulloch and Pitts. And they sort of abstracted away from what they knew about neuroscience. And by the way, McCulloch and Pitts were the third and fourth orders on the famous What the Frog's Eye Tells the Frog's Brain paper with Lethven and Maturana, which was the first real paper on functional neuroscience a few years later. So they went on to do a lot of stuff, but they treated neurons as logical machines. They described it in terms of logical calculus. They essentially turned them into logic gates. This is 1943. When was the logic gate invented? 1938. Claude Shannon, his master's thesis. Someone had to invent it. That's who did it. This is from Marvin Minsky's PhD thesis in 1953. I typed it out there so you can read it. Theory of Neural Analog Reinforcement Systems and its Application to the Brain Model Problem. And this was his PhD at Princeton in 1953. And it's worth reading the real introduction here. Terms like neural net or nerve net are used that represents an abstraction of some of the knowledge derived from contemporary neurophysiological theory, based on 1953 understanding of neuroscience. Now, this was not quite what we think of as a neural net today, but in the later 50s, Rosenblatt at Cornell had analog circuits for it. And by 1960, Bernie Widrow at Stanford had this as the model of the neuron. It's exactly what we use today. He even has the offset for the threshold, and then goes through a quantizer, he calls it. So this was what we call neural nets today, are based on these neurons from 1960, based on our knowledge of neuroscience then. We've learned some stuff about neuroscience since then, but we call them neural networks, and that gets the public and the press thinking, oh, it's just like the brain. just like the brain. Just like the understanding in 1960. By the way, it was really hard to build this stuff back then. It says it's a chemical memista. It was a pencil lead with wire wrapped around it. He had a symbol, and here's the box. This is one neuron. There's 16 inputs. There are 16 potentiometers. There's the desired output, or the training input, the 16 little switches on the bottom right, and then there's a feedback switch in the middle there. So those sorts of neurons have driven cycle after cycle amazingly well, but there have been other cycles. And every time some new thing comes along, it's a bit like a soccer game for 5-year-olds. They all run to the ball. Everyone runs to the ball. Yes, this is it. This is exciting. My advice to people is be the kids who don't run to the ball. Be thinking about something else, because that's not where everyone else is going to be trying to do stuff. And this continues to happen. I have this annual thing where I evaluate some predictions I made on January 1st, 2018. January 1st, 2008, this is on my blog, and here's one of the many predictions. I said 2018, January, was just 5 years after, it was November 2012, when deep learning came out at NeurIPS. So it's been around for a while. Deep learning, deep learning, deep learning. And I said, on the left, the emergence of the generally agreed upon next big thing in AI beyond deep learning, no earlier than 2023, but certainly by 2027. And then I said on the right, whatever it turns out to be, I had no clue what would be the next big thing. Something that someone is already working on, and there are already published papers about it. I said this on January 1st, 2018. This is the Transformer paper, which was published 2 months before at NeurIPS. So I was right. I was sort of lucky. I admit I was sort of lucky. But the next big thing, there was already a published paper. And people started to hear about it 2022. But 2023 was when it became the next big thing. I was sort of lucky. But it got hyped up. And here's what happens with hype. This is from 1843. A description of Babbage's engine, and if any of you have read that description, it was translated by Ada Lovelace, and she had notes, which are bigger than the original paper, and it's great. And here's Ada Lovelace's beginning of note G. It's desirable, in general, it's desirable to guard against the possibility of exaggerated ideas that might arise in the powers of the analytic engine. And she goes on, because if you think it's too great, then by a sort of natural reaction, we undervalue the true state of the case when there's disappointment, when we do discover that our notions have surpassed those that were really tenable. So she says, if it's overhyped, you'll then go to thinking it's not as good as it actually is. She was really smart. She died at 36. Ada Lovelace was really smart. So that's happened again and again with these hype cycles. Now, I'm talking about hype, and I'm saying it's been around for a long time. Has it really been around for a long time? I mentioned Rosenblatt before at Cornell in 1957. I showed some of his paper. This is 1958, a report on an intelligent automaton. And if you read down here, I've got to get close, it says, introducing the perceptron, which is a single neuron, single linear neuron, a machine that senses, recognizes, remembers, and responds like the human mind. One, not 175 billion, but one. So there was hype. There has been hype. This is from Deep Blue in the mid-90s, when Deep Blue beat Kasparov. And this is New York Times. Deep Blue was an IBM machine. And people start to personalize it. It says, Deep Blue did the magnanimous thing. It kept its monastic silence. So people are just projecting onto these machines. 2011, Jeopardy. Watson beat the best players at Jeopardy. It was a standalone machine which was not connected to the network, played as well as it could according to the rules, and it beat the 2 best players. This is John Markoff's story in the New York Times the next day. And what does he say? Oh, where is it? Watson showed itself to be imperfect. Yeah, but IBM's already developing uses for Watson's technology, could have significant impact on the way doctors practice and consumers buy products. 2011. Does this sound familiar to anyone? The future will happen very quickly. Add voice recognition, possibly, making the service available in as little as 18 months. Went on in the story, quoting someone, Watson-like tools will cause us to reconsider what it is we want students to do. It's going to change everything. Interact with consumers on a variety of subjects like buying decisions, technical support. And how much of this actually happened with Watson? Does anyone remember? That would be none of it. IBM put incredible amounts of money. If you take that story, and you do it in early 2024, and you replace Watson with Transformers, and you replace IBM with Microsoft, the story pretty much reads exactly correct for that time. So this is by 2017. It's not working out so well. Maybe it can get into digital marketing. 2018, they're laying off all the medical stuff. Later in 2018, what went wrong with Watson? So we see these booms, and everyone gets excited and runs to it. But don't worry, this time is different. Sure to be different. Those people back in 2011, they were so dumb and stupid, they didn't understand anything. Today, we got it. And the two things are, of course, generative AI and humanoid robots. Now, Gartner has the Gartner hype cycle, which is, I think, they use this tool because it happens in all sorts of things. It happened in blockchain. It's happened in quantum computing. As an innovation trigger, everyone gets excited. There's a peak of inflated expectations, the trough of disillusionment, which was what Ada Lovelace talked about in 1843. And then you get better, and then you finally get productivity. So this is from October of 2024, and there's generative AI, according to Gartner. It's peaked, it's on its way down. But here's humanoid robots. They've hardly started the climb. There's going to be a lot more hype. I'm a little disappointed to see that artificial general intelligence hasn't even reached its hype yet. I got to listen to this more? I don't know. So these two current hype attractors, they have a lot of similarities, generative AI and humanoid robots. They both have crazy startup valuations, completely crazy. None, I was talking to Louis last night, and I told him, no, he's not going to become a trillionaire from Apptronics. It's just not going to happen. But the valuations are up in the billions and billions for companies that don't have products yet. Big tech is spending billions of dollars on both generative AI, that's been pretty public, and now it's leaking out that a lot of them are doing humanoid robots for homes. It's the era of big learning in both of them. And then things diverge a little bit. Academia is priced out of generative AI by the cloud dollars, and it's priced out of humanoid robots by developing the humanoid form, and you've got to buy them. And they're not very good in general. Generative AI promises plentiful, low-cost white-collar labor. Humanoid robots promise plentiful, low-cost blue-collar labor. Generative AI, we're lured in by how well they do human language. Humanoid robots, my first law of robotics, we're lured in by them looking like humans. That means they'll be able to do everything humans can do. We get lured in by the form. Both of them are driven, the hype, by two of my AI prediction sins, which I haven't talked about yet, but different ones. In the case of generative AI, it's performance versus competence and indistinguishability from magic. In the case of humanoid robots, it's exponentialism and misunderstanding speed of deployment, I think. So I had published back in 2017 on my blog and then in Technology Review, the 7 deadly sins of AI prediction. And I'm going to talk about these 4. The 2 on the left are what is driving generative AI. The 2 on the right is what is driving humanoid. Indistinguishable from magic. This is from Arthur C. Clarke's third law. Arthur C. Clarke was a science fiction writer, one of my favorites as a kid. He's on the set of 2001, A Space Odyssey. He co-wrote that. But he also wrote real books on popular topics like interplanetary flight. He was the founder of the British Interplanetary Society. He invented the idea of geostationary communication satellites. in the 40s, except he thought that they would have to have astronauts up there to replace the vacuum tubes, which would be failing on the satellites. His third law is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If it's way advanced from what you know about, you've got no way of understanding mechanism, so you've got no way of knowing limits. And that's like with magic. With magic, you can't say where the boundary is. And he says if it's a new technology that is surprising, you can't say where the boundary is. It's indistinguishable from magic. So this is late 2023. I tried with GPT 3.5. I said, write a sonnet about what is a robot based on Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Bam, these words just came out. Shall I compare thee to a robot's grace? Thou art more programmed and less random's chance. Rough gears do shake the circuits of thy face, and sparks of silicon in thy circuit stand. It just did this. How the hell did it do this? It's amazing. It just wrote that sonnet immediately. It's sort of magic. What can't it do? What stops it? And I think this is what's driving a lot of the investment in GPT still. I'll come back to that in a second. Yeah, it didn't really do exactly what I asked. It didn't say what a robot is. It's more of a love poem, which, Shakespeare's 18th sonnet was a love poem, but left out the mechanism. I think this one on the right is actually a better version because it tells you how they work. Although, in the second quatrain there, the third and fourth lines rhyming clumsily with libraries, that's pretty bad. But I actually think it's a good sonnet because I wrote it. And I'm a published poet. I'm a published poet in IEEE Spectrum. So I went back to ChatGPT and I said, please write another one, but this time concentrate on what defines a robot, which it immediately did. That's amazing. So it's more about what a robot is. The love stuff, it got out. The last two lines are not as close. It's not perfect, but it's still amazing that this thing, this architecture can do that. And it's amazing what it can do, so people think it must be able to do everything, because there's no limits. And you just see, we'll make it reason. We'll make it, reason by steps. It must have a model of the world in there. It must be buried somewhere in there, because we don't have an intuitive understanding of how all those weights make it able to do this. And then there's performance versus competence. So you've probably all heard of the Monty Hall problem. It's a TV show, and there's 3 doors, and behind one door there's a car, you don't know which door there are 2 other doors, there's a goat for some reason, and you choose a door, and then Monty Hall opens one of the other 2 doors and says, here's a goat. Do you want to change your guess? And it turns out the right thing is to change the guess, because you've actually gotten a little more information by him opening one of the doors. So this is someone describing the problem without calling it the Monty Hall problem. This was to ChatGPT 4 in December. And it says, oh, that's the Monty Hall problem. And then it goes on, bottom left, to explain the probabilities. It's great. So it performed really well on that. And then people think, oh, if a human could perform that well, they must actually understand stuff, so they're competent in a general area. And this is Gary Smith and you've all seen papers like this. Gary Smith at Pomona, he then went on and changed it slightly. This is his conversation, and he says there's only 2 doors. And Monty opens one and says to the goat, do you want to change your guess? There's only 2 doors? And you know where the goat is? And you've chosen the other one? No, but it says, of course this is what you do. As you look down there, it just rehashes the explanation for the other one. So he tried something simpler. He said, let's take tic-tac-toe and rotate the board 90 degrees. Yeah. And then he goes on, he's got a lot of blah, blah, blahs there. And then he says, well, which is going to be more exciting if you rotate left or right? And it just goes on and blathers. Where are we? Blathers away. And it decides a left rotation of the board is going to be much more interesting. It's going to be new. It's going to be novel. there is no understanding in there, in the way we think. And I actually like this book by Max Bender. He's a CEO of an LLM company, but it's a really good book, and he's written a lot about neuroscience. You know, and he points out that we've got to have these 5 big things in brains in the last 300 million years. Reinforcing, we've been doing reinforcing, certainly Peter has, but then speaking, which is humans, has skipped 2 things, simulation and mentalizing. And we have special purpose pieces of our brain in the hippocampus, in the entorhinal cortex to do physical simulation of our world. We have special stuff for mentalizing, models of other people thinking. It doesn't have that, and somehow people believe, but it's so good at writing sonnets, it must have it somewhere in there. Not so much. Now let's talk about the mistakes for humanoids. Exponentialism. And people, this is my pet peeve, people now use the word exponential for big. So here's from some random Reddit thing. I think it was berating me for not understanding AI. AI advancement isn't stopping, it's growing exponentially. It's getting better, so it must be exponential. This is Gordon Moore's 4 data points in 1965, the number of components on a chip. He only had 4 data points. And he went wild and extrapolated out for 10 years that we were going to keep doing that. And it turned out to be more like 40 or 50 years. We got spoiled by this. But the key to this was, in building a digital circuit, the question is, are there electrons there? Is there a current? And in their circuits back in the 60s, we had a load of electrons. So we could half the size of the current and still say yes or no, there's current there. And we could halve it again, still say yes or no, until you get down to just a few electrons or just a few atoms. And that's what happened somewhere, it's getting close to 20 years ago. So then to keep increasing, we had to go to multi-core, when you couldn't get more oomph out of cutting stuff in half. The physics limited. And so we've had this amazing run of increasing computation. It's the most amazing thing in technology in all of human history. There's never been this speed up. But now everyone applies it to everything. And I think that's wrong. I used to use it when I was head of CSAIL. I had a table of, and this was to scare people into giving us money. A technique I learned from Nicholas Negroponte at the Media Lab. And I had here's a $400 iPod. How much memory does it have? I plotted this out. It's 2007. And, And I said, well, how much are we going to have in 2017 on an iPod? We're going to have 160 terabytes. Well, the world's going to be different. What are you going to do? Come talk to us. We'll teach you some shit. What was the reality in 2017? It hadn't changed in 10 years. After double, no change for 10 years. Why was that? Well, because you didn't need any more than 160 gigabytes to have all the music you could possibly want. Now, there's more and more photos and movies on your phones. It's starting to get bigger, but it didn't change. So people sort of think, stuff's going up. I lived through Moore's law. It's going to keep going straight up, and then it's going to be better than humans. Okay? And that's what everyone keeps thinking. But in reality, a lot of times, there's been a little spurt, and then it levels off. And there are 3 reasons why an exponential law can fail. It can fail because it gets to a physical limit where the process of halving and doubling no longer works. And that's important for humanoid robots. Humanoid robots, well, I'll get to it in a second, but keep that one in mind. The market demand gets saturated. There's no economic driver. That's what happened with iPods and iPhones, the amount of memory. Or it may not have been exponential in the first place. There was no doubling. It just was a sudden increase. But this all comes under exponential. Everything's exponential. So robots in the physical world are either for entertainment, and a lot of the humanoid companies are actually for entertainment and engagement, or they must move mass around. Otherwise, what's the point? I started building commercial humanoid robots in the late 90s, my real baby. It was for entertainment for children. It didn't have to lift stuff. It just had to shuck its thumb and make noises and do stuff and cry and sense that you're rocking it. But a humanoid robot that's supposed to do some physical work, it's supposed to lift something heavy. Now, can you halve the size of the motors? Maybe they're inefficient to start with. Can you halve the size of the motors a second time? A third time? No. You need this physics. You need to put an amount of energy in there to lift that thing. But people, the hypesters, are applying, oh, it's exponential. So here's a consultant, little practice, talking about, find out why AI and humanoid robotics are transforming our global labor engine. And here's the key diagram shows that the labor cost per hour is going to go down to pennies in 2045. You know, but right now it's between $2 and $10 an hour for a humanoid. Just a minute. Does anyone here have a humanoid doing real work and paying them $2 to $10 an hour? I searched everywhere to find an actual quoted price. I did find one. It was $40,000 an hour. That's the actual stuff. So this hype machine, I noticed that longhorn bull statue out there. It's bullshit. That's just bullshit. Here's another consulting company, and it's in Germany. You think the Germans are honest? No. Humanoid robots can already perform many, soon most, and in the long term, all physical activities of humanoids. We know that's not true. Even the first part is not true. And it goes on. They're going to have an AI brain. Yeah. You didn't think of that, did you? Give it an AI brain. This will make them cognitively intelligent. They'll be able to think and find solutions that are not being taught directly, because they're going to have an AI brain. At my last company, I had someone call. It was about ABB had just given $10 million to a company that Dilip George was at, and he said, ABB, they're going to have a brain. They're going to have a brain. Have you got a brain for your robot? We need a brain. Anyway, so they're important, have a brain. That was just VC. And they'll learn new skills at enormous speed. In fact, the pace of learning will increase exponentially. That's going to happen. That's what everything happens. And you know, there's going to be 1.5 billion. We humans will reinvent our understanding of the meaning of life. It is the second coming. It's happening, finally. Oh, there's more. Biggest growth market of the future. Okay, now speed of deployment. People completely underestimate how long it takes to deploy new technology, completely. What does innovation to deployment really look like? And here's the quick answer. First, you overpromise, then you underdeliver, and then you keep doing it for decades. That's what deployment looks like. Let's look at autonomous vehicles. In 2017, I took a snapshot of this website, and I did the coloring myself. This is different people, to different companies saying stuff about autonomous driving. In parentheses, it's the year the prediction was made, and in blue, it's the year they say the prediction's going to come true. Now, and the orange arrows are where I happened to hear they later changed. But now, oops, the pink numbers are the years have gone by. None of them met those years they predicted, and none of them have still. Not a single one of those has come true. Not a single one. And in 2025, Continental, it's a first-tier auto manufacturer, they're going to have it. 2025, Daimler's going to have it. 2025, driverless cars will be all over the world. None of that's going to happen either. So, driverless cars, I first went to a driverless car talk at IJCAI in 1979 in Japan. It was actually the same conference where convolutional neural networks were introduced by Fukushima. It was a great conference. And they had a driverless car in 1979 that had driven 30 kilometers an hour on streets. There wasn't other traffic, though. And they refer to an earlier paper, which I have not been able to track down. So in 1979, people were thinking about autonomous vehicles and trying to build them. By 1987, Ernst Dickmann had his first autonomous drive on an Autobahn near Munich. By 1990, he'd got up to 100 kilometers an hour, and he took that car to Paris, and it drove around the streets of Paris in 1990. It must be ready to be mass deployed, right? You can already drive in Paris traffic in 1990. Kept going, got them a new breed of technical beings, because now they can drive at 130 kilometers an hour. In 1995, end-to-end learning. Dean Pomerleau had this car drive from Pittsburgh to LA, with a human sitting there, intervening about once every 1 or 2 miles. Keep that number in mind, 1995. Okay. DARPA Grand Challenge, having robots drive across the desert. They went 7 miles in 2004, 132 miles in 2005. Wow, this is ready for the big time. So then the DARPA Urban Challenge that Sebastian Thrun was then at Stanford, won with his vehicle, driving in traffic. And then everyone got to think, well, we can have self-driving cars with one-for-one replacement for human drivers without having to do anything else. Learning's going to do it all. And Sebastian then went to Google, started Google X, started Waymo, which is now around. And the conceit was learning will do it all. And we still see that conceit with Teslas. This is from Wall Street Journal investigative report, getting a lot of data from Tesla crashes. That's a semi-trailer overturned. It didn't recognize what it was, so there was nothing there, so the Tesla just smashed into it and killed the person. Because when you just do end-to-end learning, you forget this other stuff that's important. Looming detectors. Looming detectors have been understood for a long time. Looming detectors let you know not to hit something even if you don't know the identity of it. So the conceit of we're just going to use neural networks to label images, that must be what people do. It's not what people do. So new technologies rarely simply fit into today's world without significant changes to infrastructure. It does take time. And as one-for-one replacement became inevitable, it was a big prize. Lots of car companies joined in. A lot of VC money went in there. There was a monoculture of learning-based methods, massive duplication of collecting non-public data sets, killed the idea of digitalization of roads, of putting more sensing and having standards to tell cars what was sensed remotely. We don't need that. We're just going to be able to have the car know what it needs to know. And so I think it's made things less safe, slowed down safety innovations, and has slowed down the whole process. You guys had cruise vehicles? Yeah, it's got a Texas plate on it. I'm in San Francisco. For the last 5 years, I have not been able to walk out of my house without seeing an autonomous vehicle, literally. Rule 2, don't take away agency. Firefighters in San Francisco got really pissed off with those cruise vehicles. They would just come into a fire. Oh, stop, I can't move. The fire chief gave firefighters permission to use a sledgehammer on them, to smash their windows, to smash them, to stop them going in, because they were taking away agency from the firefighters. It got ugly. They shut down, then GM scrapped them in December. They're gone. The one standing are Waymos. You have Waymos here. I looked at my app last night. You still need a magic number or something to use it, whereas in San Francisco, I can use them anytime I want. My record for the number of Waymos I've seen driving in 2 blocks, where I can see them all at once, is 8. It is thick in San Francisco with these. They're not quite there yet, but they're making progress. But it's not going to roll out across the world without a lot more work. And this was last year. Waymo started having the horns toot at human drivers to get them out of the way. And this is them all coming back to their parking lot at 3 or 4 a.m., and they're all tooting at each other. and next to apartment buildings, and the people in the apartment buildings getting really pissed off at Waymos because they're tooting at each other. And then February 2023, Chinese New Year in San Francisco, the streets are always covered in people. No human driver would drive down there. Waymo, I'm supposed to go this way. The people happen to be armed with fireworks. And it got bad. It got really bad. So don't take away agency from people. They will fight back. And here's the kicker. None of them are fully autonomous. There are remote drivers. They intercede, the rate at which they intercede, every 1 to 2 miles. Same as Dean Pomeroy in 1995. Now, Tesla is going to do it. It's going to be autonomous taxis. They're coming. Except Tesla's been advertising on their website for remote drivers for Teslas. And why is that important? The promise is there's going to be an economic thing that happens, but it doesn't necessarily come true. It's overhyped. Okay. What is the hype around humanoid robots promising? Well, it's promising more profits for NVIDIA, which is why Jensen had them up there and is now the fifth richest person in the world. No one really knows how to evaluate them. This was a thing from last year. It's sort of like the NFL draft. How tall are they? How fast can they move? How much do they weigh? But they're going to replace jobs. Just a minute. The humanoid doesn't have Wi-Fi. It's got to have a little tablet to read. And really, the humanoid has breasts? What the? It's about appearance. An argument for humanoids is that everything in the world is built for humans, tall, balancing. We look down from above. If you're a Roomba down there, it's hard to know how to get out. But if you're a human and you can look down from above, you know stuff. It's a human-built environment. And they have dexterous arms and hands coming from above. So is that match good enough to invest in the humanoid form? It's not a new argument. Here's someone I read recently. Past decade has seen an explosion of research in humanoid robots, bipedal locomotion, blah, blah, blah. It gets a bit crazy about pole balancing down there. When's this? Oh, it's from 2004, International Journal of Humanoid Robots, Volume 1, Issue 1, Page 1. Oh, and who's the first author? Oh, I wrote that. So that argument's been around for a long time. In fact, this is a project I had with my grad students. Instead of legs, we had balancing wheels, a Segway. We had a robot arm up there, a little tiny head. It was called Cardia, the Roman goddess of doors and hinges and handles. And this wandered around our lab, opening doors and going through them. And as many of you know, I built lots of humanoids, did lots of research with humanoids, and eventually had a company selling humanoid robots with human form, doing tasks that humans did. You can see the robot here doing the task, a person in the distance. This is using force sensing. It doesn't have to know exactly where that cart full of piece of metal had been rolled up. It just uses a vacuum gripper and pushes them into the machine, feels the forces, does the alignment, just like a person does them. But it turned out to be not economically viable. We had to make them safe, make them easy enough for people to intercede, program. This is just kids showing up from a high school, or from an elementary school, able to program the robots. We didn't have hips on the robots. The arms had to be somewhat bigger. Because they couldn't reach in human spaces, and they had to be safe. Little rubber pads there mean, and I used to get hit in the head by these robots all the time, meant we could see the forward model wasn't matched and pull the energy out of the thing quick enough not to break my head. That may have been foolish that I did that, but that was my test method with my engineers. Anyway. A human form, okay. Japan has had humanoid robots for a long time. their hands not so good, but they walked. And then along came Fukushima in March of 2011. And these 4 buildings here, these guys, those 4 nuclear reactors. There's 2 more up on the hill, but the tsunami came in, 3 of those melted down. And gosh, and there was a lot of radioactivity. That's a built for human environment. Surely we can send humanoid robots in there. Well, they couldn't. They were not up to it. They were not up to the task. 7 days later, I had some of our military robots. Have you been flashing that at me? Am I way over time yet?
10 minutes.
Oh, easy. So we had 6,500 robots deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, dealing with roadside bombs, teleoperated. We got 6 of them there on a week after. We trained Tokyo Electric Power Company people to operate them. We did not go into the Fukushima site. I later went in 2014. I can tell stories about that, anyone who wants to know. And then these robots went and set up Wi-Fi hotspots. It was a non-digital power plant. It was 40 years old. And the only way you could tell what was happening was go and look at the analog pressure meters and temperature meters in areas where a person would die within 10 minutes, let alone get unhealthy dose of radiation. And so we were able to help with a lot there. Humanoid robots are not always the right form for human built for environments. There was rubble, there was all sorts of stuff. We had to scramble over them with the tracks. End-to-end learning for humanoid robots, large behavior models, teams of people training the robots, showing them what to do. It worked for speech and language. Surely that means it's going to work for humanoids. I'm not so sure. We haven't had a lab-ready demonstration that really works. Just, I think it was last week. Which one's this, Optimus? Is this Optimus?
Figure.
No, what? Figure. They had a video and said, well, first look at the headline. AI-powered robots advance in general tasks in a crowded market. There is no market. To have a market, someone has to buy something. They're not being sold. There is no market. There's a wished-for market. But this video, I'm not going to show the video, was a complete self-own. Whoever decided to do it for Figure, So what happens in the video? The robots are on the other side of a table, so they can't fall on the person. The person comes up with a bag of groceries, puts it down, reaches in, takes them out one at a time, puts them flat on the tabletop, and then says to the robot, I don't know whether the robots could hear him or it was just fake, put them away. Now the robots stare at them and pick them up, not out of the bag like he did, pick them up at about between 1/10 and 1/20 of the speed of a human and take them and put them places. It ain't ready for prime time. It's not ready for prime time. So here's some advice on what to watch for in, I call it humanoid robot theater. For their whole body, how well they walk. More importantly, how well they fall. Do they fall well? Can they get up? I think the booster robot back there can, if I'm what I've heard. But remember the cube square law? You get to a full-size robot, it's going to be a lot harder than that. And last night, Peter showed me some stuff from RoboSoccer, which I think is a perfect test bed for this, where all the PIs are running around behind their robots in case they fall over so they can rescue them. Let them fall. If they can't fall, you can't do much. I'll move to QA. Okay. Are there ever people in close proximity? Do they dynamically use their hips when they manipulate? Do they dynamically brace with their feet in order to apply forces? If they can't, then they can't apply much force because they'll push themselves over. Do they use whole body manipulation where they grab something? If they can't, they're not like humans. How fast can they grasp? All these questions about grasp, reorientation, can they use a tool applied to a surface? Mostly, none of these videos do these things. And these are important aspects of one-for-one replacement of people with humanoids. So I think there's lots of things, and many of them are being done here already, of things that about mechanisms and sensors are very important. You can't just take a position-controlled thing and teach it to be a force-controlled thing. You have to have the right sort of sensing. And force control is important. We haven't made much progress with hands and robots, fast hands. And then trying to get away from the end-to-end and having more structure in there, learning different things, learning with forces, self-exploration. I think there's just so many things that we have enough equipment now to do again, which we couldn't do before. By the way, humans have 5-fingered hands. We're making humanoid robots with 5-fingered hands, but we don't have them because they're optimal. We have them because they stabilized getting out of the water onto land. And if you look at the fossils, they all had 5-fingered hands. They had it way before manipulation. So we've tried to build new robot hands based on the human form. Oh, and then when you're doing end-to-end learning, you have to learn what a human hand does. But maybe they should be more like sea anemones, just lots of little things that grab stuff. And think out of the box. And here's something no teach by demonstration will teach you. And by the way, don't do this without a glove on your left hand. It's really. So my personal expectations for humanoids, there'll be lots of good research done chasing them. It'll rarely be the form factor that works best. They'll not be cheap as dirt. Some applications will be found for them, yeah. But we are not going to be all writing poetry and eating grapes while they do all our work. Lastly, I just want to go back to Arthur C. Clarke's third laws. The second one's really important. Discover the limits of the possible by venturing way past them. The first one, well, there's this other clause in there, Peter, and I don't know whether this one's really necessary or not, but I'll leave you guys to decide that. Okay. We're taking questions. So I think there's going to be a runner with a microphone. So if anyone's got a question, there's a microphone back there. Stand up, wave your hand. No one has any questions? Someone has questions. Yeah, there's one down here. There's one here. There's two in the front row.
This has been fabulous. Thank you very much. Very enlightening. So humanoid versus fit for purpose, humanoid versus fit for purpose, generalize. So what do you think about more companies focusing on very narrow fit for purpose?
Well, I think that's how you get deployment, and you can change the infrastructure to support that. I think that's why the self-driving cars haven't done as well as they had. In the 1990s, the Citrix project at Berkeley that Rosina Baichi ran was about putting sensors on roads to tell all our cars about stuff. It got killed by the self-driving car movement. And so, is that fit for purpose? In a way, yes. Special sensors on the roads outside the cars, it would have helped. So by just trying to do the general thing as humans do, you narrow down the possibilities so much that I think you miss lots of things which in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years can be done. Whereas that goal is so far off, it's not going to be around for a long, long time. There's one here, and then there's one there. Someone there? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm a UT student, aspiring student founder, and I guess I was curious about a few things, I guess, working together. One was kind of this environment in venture capital space and startup space of FOMO, right? And then the second one being the common phrase of the optimist always wins while the cynical and the pessimist will stay stagnant. And I was curious from your perspective, in the world where there is a lot of overhype, is it better to continue pursuing things for the sake of pursuing them, or is it better to then just take upon that road of caution while, trying new ideas? Caution.
I'm suggesting extravagant exploration, but not like what everyone else is doing. And the fear of missing out in venture capital is true and crazy. And because Bill Gates was a dropout, because Zuckerberg was a dropout, there's been an overmatch to liking dropouts. So now VC firms they like 20-somethings who quit college and are saying, this is a case that I saw recently, these 20-something guys all lived in a house together. They were getting term sheets up the wazoo. They were going to build a humanoid robot to do the laundry. 20-something guy, they were 20 years old. They didn't know that some people like to separate the colors in the laundry. They were, why? They didn't know there were machines with front loading, top loading. Why? So there's this sort of over-exuberance of celebrating ignorance. Oh, I've seen that somewhere else in the country. Oh, it's some of the same people. So they are going to get burned. They are getting burned, and they will get burned. So what I'm advocating is look for hard problems that other people aren't working on. Is Louis here? I told him he wasn't going to be a trillionaire. The chance that you do something great is low, but I think if you work on a problem for a number of years, the chance that you do something useful, the chance of that in academia are higher than if you start a company with some other 20-year-olds who don't know anything about business or anything about the task they're saying must be easy. We'll just throw more data at it. So look for interesting, hard problems and go work on them. Thank you. Yeah.
That's all the time we have for questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.